I want to, but I can't clip that for shorts. There's no way. I'm not doing it. I'm not gonna do that. I don't.
Yeah,
No.
if we ever do get monetized, well, that will get us demonetized.
That's demonized.
Yeah. Don't prune us,
all right.
YouTube.
No, yeah, it did that. That's great. Don't prune us, YouTube.
Hello and welcome to May the Review Be With You with Nick and Joe. I'm Joe.
I'm Nick.
And today we're talking about Loki, Season 1, Episode 1, Glorious Purpose. No, wait, sorry. Season 2, Episode 6, Glorious Purpose. Nick, never before have I wished that we had done this podcast like years ago, like when Loki Season 1 had going on, because I absolutely would have just replayed the track of me doing that right now just to like get our Ouroboros going. Just would have loved that, but you know it's not what we do. We can't time slip, and time for us is hindsight. Hindsight's 2020. So how about that?
How about that? Oh, what a fantastically done episode. I don't even know where to begin.
Okay, so like real quick notes here. So this is a first for Nick and I. We are coming off the heels of this episode. I think each of us probably like about 90 minutes after having watched it, if that. Does that sound right? Yeah. Yep. So we are fresh, fresher than we were for Guardians of the Galaxy 3, which I think that was a 24-hour turnaround. A lot quicker here. And yeah, Nick, I'm in a similar boat to you. I'm pretty jazzed from this episode. This ended in pretty much the way that I hoped. Yeah, the way I hoped.
You predicted it. You called it. You absolutely called the ending. But it was even more fantastic than I expected. So let's just hit it from the beginning, right? So
Okay, man.
We open with Loki time slipping back to the moment before the loom, or rather the moment that Victor Timely is walking down the stairs to try and save the loom from destruction, basically. Well, actually that's not true. It was to save the loom from overloading, because the loom wasn't going to break in that moment. The loom isn't what breaks. It's the timelines overload and rip a hole in everything. Which now I'm already confused. But
dude, so that's actually I feel like that's what's so amazing and beautiful about this episode. This episode has so much going on in it, but at the same time, as like wonderfully complex as it is, the actual like plot line of this episode is probably like one of the most simple plot lines of like all 12 episodes of this series. It's literally just, can Loki stop the end of time? And like that's the whole episode, right? Yeah. Like it's him just trying every combination he can come up with.
And I love how in the episode he starts with like the smallest amounts of time that he's trying to make it work, right? Like at the very beginning, it's like, okay, how quick can I explain Victor Timely the directions? Because 30 seconds quicker is going to be enough to.
He's trying to buy seconds.
Like he's buying seconds at the beginning, and then he starts to buy minutes, and then he's buying days, and then he's buying centuries and becoming a well-renowned engineer and physicist and quantum physicist. Like unbelievable.
So I want to highlight that moment. There were a couple times in this episode where like I felt myself go like more than once, and that moment, the centuries like
later, later is what it said.
Yeah. The cue card for centuries later. That was one of those moments for me. You know what? Some heroes sacrifice themselves for the greater good of the universe, and they die with a snap. Other heroes study physics for hundreds of years to save everything. You tell me what's harder. I know what my answer would be. I don't want to study physics for hundreds of years. That sounds like hell.
It's so like I mean, obviously there's a bunch of different things in between that happened before that, but it's really just the nitty-gritty of it is just like, you know, trying to buy time to figure out how to stop the branches from overloading the loom and ripping a hole in time, right? That's what he's trying to do. And
Yes.
and having to travel back hundreds of years just to be able to study enough of physics to be able to build the right device is just like an incredible plot line. And now Loki is like one of the smartest people in the universe.
Dude, right? So like when this
Moving
show
forward, he's one of the smartest in the universe.
When with the conclusion of this show, which I think we can safely assume that's it. There's not going to be a Loki season 3. It doesn't seem like it.
Oh, that's an interesting point already. That's a good point too.
Well, think about it. At the end of Loki season 1, we got that mid-credit scene where someone stamps like a pile of papers, and you get Loki will return in season 2. Right. We didn't get that stamp. No approval.
Right.
No approval for season 3. But I wanted to get back to what you were saying. Yeah, Loki being one of the smartest people in the MCU. I think he's also now the most powerful character in the MCU. There's no one. Like, he did it. He's everything.
He's quite literally stronger than Thanos with 6 Infinity Stones in a way.
Oh, it's child's play now.
Right?
It's child's play.
It's unbelievable. Which I imagine is going to bode very well for the multiversal war that is on the way.
Like, I'm so excited.
The fact that is like solidified, and it's like, hey, guess what, guys? Loki chose to believe Sylvie and believe in Sylvie and believe that free will should be what's decided. And because of that, hundreds of different versions of He Who Remains are coming. And it's going to get crazy.
I think the moment now that I'm looking forward to most in the entire MCU is this has to happen. It'll either be in the Kang movie with the Avengers, which the name of that is escaping me. Kang Dynasty? Kang War? Kang Dynasty, thank you. Yeah. Kang Dynasty Avengers, or Secret Wars Avengers.
Yeah.
There's definitely going to be a moment where Thor is finally reintroduced to Loki.
Oh,
and like it's just got to be this moment of like, are you kidding me? Like, what? You're never actually going to die, are you? Like, it's never actually going to happen. I cannot wait for that.
Well, but here's the thing. Because of all the timelines now just being run, they're like just like, and there's millions now, right? Like, they're all over the place. Like, that means there's also a ton of different versions of Loki. So like, Thor might have that moment, but it might be with like 4 different Lokis before it's his own actual brother that he knows, the Thor that we know, right? Because like, now there's a Thor in all these timelines, like not maybe in everyone, but we're gonna have like, it's gonna be ridiculous. Like, we're gonna have multiple versions of these superheroes allegedly, and it's just gonna get wild. I don't know how they're gonna keep it all like consistent and straight and not confusing. I'm already confused.
This episode alone, I was amazed with how well they kept track of everything.
It was done so well.
Yeah, with how out of order everything is shot. It's so interesting, so cool. This is another, for me at least, this is another home run for same directors that have been banging the drum on here. Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead. Checking. Yep, Eric Martin has written every single episode this season. He only wrote 2 episodes in season 1. Would you like to guess which 2 episodes Eric Martin was responsible for?
In season 1?
Mm-hmm.
The episode where they are at the end of time.
That's 1. You got that?
Which episode was that? 5?
Episode 6, For All Time
6.
Always.
For all time always. Okay. And then the first one maybe?
God, how amazing would that have been if he did Glorious Purpose and Glorious Purpose?
Yeah,
God,
yeah,
I
yeah.
wish that was the case. It's not.
Yeah, it's not. Okay.
No, he wrote episode 4, the Nexus event, uh,
Oh,
where
dog, that is one of my favorite episodes of the whole
that's a
series.
good
That's
one.
such a good episode.
That's a good
I
one.
kept, and you know what? Like to talk about that real quick, I kept waiting in this season for there to be a moment between him and Sylvie again, where they like,
Mm.
or like like love like changed, like did something that wasn't supposed to happen, And I don't know. I wonder what the reason was for them not going with that plot line again, because like we really didn't get much more from that. We didn't get anything about that this season, right? There were some moments, and there were some like I mean, I guess you can make a case that we did get that, but it was more in dialogue, right? And not actual like it's
You're
tough.
right.
It's tough, right? Because
It's
it was
it's
such a big moment, and it felt like the. I guess we get that when he like can't kill her at the end of this episode, right? When he's
mm,
going through this, he's doing everything he can to try to save the 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 branches from overloading, and he's trying to save the failsafe from not having to be activated. And the only way to do that is to kill Sylvie because she will not hold back. And she's like, in every version, she's going to kill He Who Remains. It doesn't matter, no matter what Loki says, right?
yeah, it's a constant. Yeah.
And I guess because he can't kill her, maybe that is a way of the writers and the to be like, this is us taking what happened in that episode in season 1 and the Nexus event from we're implementing that here, but in a different way by Loki not being able to kill her potentially. I don't know. It's interesting.
That was oh my god. We learned what that's called in did you watch What If? I forgot.
A few, but I didn't watch all of
Did
it.
you watch the did you watch the best episode, the Doctor Strange episode?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, God, that episode's so good. That's called something. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it's an event that you can't change no matter like how hard you try. You
Oh
remember?
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah.
like, yeah, I feel
Yeah.
like that's what that is Sylvie
Yeah.
killing, or at least Sylvie wanting to kill
Right.
He Who
He Who
Remains.
Remains.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that cannot change.
So
Uh
sorry, what were you saying?
no, that was basically the
That
end of
was it?
that point.
Okay.
Yeah. I will just add you were talking about like them not really exploring that this season, and you're right. They didn't really explore that this season um too much. I think everything we needed to know about like their love uh or their love for one another, we kind of saw in episode 6, especially like when they land that kiss, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think the reason for it lingering in this season is Loki needs a reason as like a compelling character to not want to take the throne, right? To not want to like do what he has to do to
Right.
take on this burden, right?
Right.
And like he's good with Mobius, right? Like he loves Mobius, but he doesn't like love Mobius, right? He
Right.
seems to really love Sylvie. Narcissistic love. Uh but yeah, I think that's why it's got to linger there, and like him looking back before he does what he's got to do, it's appropriate that it's Mobius, yeah, but it's also Sylvie are the last two characters that he sees
Yeah.
before he journeys into mystery.
Yeah. Which those two scenes are really awesome. I want to talk about earlier in the episode real quick
Sure.
because I feel like the last three things we're going to talk about are that scene with Mobius, the scene with Sylvie, and then the scene with
Hmm.
He Who Remains.
Yeah.
Were there
Oh
any
gosh.
like the moments before, right? So like the important parts of the episode, right? I think the beginning, obviously, when we really figure out what's going on, right? Where he's buying seconds and minutes, days and weeks, and then finally he gets the centuries later thing, right? Like that is kind of like a piece of the episode, right? Like I feel like once we establish the centuries later, and then we're in this longer scene where we're watching Victor Timely like take slow steps out on the bridge, and Loki is obviously like we can tell how far along he's gotten because he's just standing there like Good job. You're doing great. You can do this.
You're
I know you
you're
can.
so brave. You're
You're
being
so
so
brave."
brave.
Like, so monotone because he's witnessed it hundreds of times, and the little quips in between, like, right,
Millions.
like millions. Sorry, yeah, millions of times. Like, and the little quips in between, like, "Hey, Victor, don't forget. Don't put. You can't place it on the bridge because it will roll off." Like, all the little things that, like, he's telling you all the little things that went wrong over the millions of tries. Um, because it's just like one thing after another that he's had to prepare for. And really just phenomenal acting job, right? By Hiddleston. I mean, he did such a good job, like getting that all across and making you believe that he's done this so many times that he's exhausted with all of these extra little details that he has to tell him. But we're in this long scene, right? And so, like, longer scene where Victor Timely's walking out and he gets there and he puts the device. I forget what the hell the device is called now. Oh my god.
The
The
throughput multiplier.
throughput
Yeah.
multiplier.
I don't know
The
how I did that,
throughput
by the way.
multiplier. Yeah,
That's how I
nicely
did it.
done.
Actually,
Bravo.
I heard Victor Timely's voice.
Victor Timely. The throughput multiplier.
Multiplier.
Puts it in, like, presses the button, shoots it in, and comes all the way back, and we think, oh, okay, this is how it's going to be done. Like, literally, like, I was like, okay, great. Like, they figured it out. What happens next, right? And we find out pretty quickly that what happens next is the branches are infinite, which means it's a scaling problem, which means there are always going to be more branches no matter how much bigger you make the loom. It will always be too small for how many branches are coming. And this is fascinating to me because I was just reading a book a couple months ago called Zero, the biography of a dangerous idea, which is literally about, like, black holes and how zero is an infinite number and you can't divide by it. And the next thing I know is Victor Timely's like, it would be like dividing by zero. And I was just like, this is great. I love when, like, TV shows line up with books I'm reading. So anyway, that was a little geek moment for me, but
I love it. Geek out, man. Geek out. Fly that flag.
But, like, it was such, like, a cool thing. You're just like, holy shit, like, this is such a bigger problem than we were thinking. It's just like, now what? My point is that this is like another section, right? So, like, from here on, and but I'm curious, like, what you have to say.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that. So something I can't tell if it bothers me or not. About, like, so I like the problem, right? The problem makes sense to me. My issue with the problem is, like, we have at least two geniuses in the room, and then there's Loki, who's been studying this for, like, forever. But granted, he's been learning from the two geniuses, right?
Yeah.
So, like, I think it's safe to say, like, he hasn't applied, at least at this point, has not applied his own critical thinking, and his intelligence on the situation is dependent on the two teachers, right? So I'm confused as to why that our two teachers here have not considered that it's infinite. Like, what do we mean? Like, we're surprised by that. I want to ask you, like, what do you think that made sense? Was there something I missed? Like,
I think the reason, now that I'm thinking about it, like, so you're totally right. It feels like it kind of comes at, like, it's like an extra detail that was like, well, how come we didn't already know that?
Right. It was like, wait, I thought we were good. I thought you guys knew this.
And I imagine, and I imagine the reason is the throughput multiplier is sending them different data than what they were getting from the loom. That's the only thing I can think of that would make it not feel like they should have already known, right? So there's some kind of, because when he's looking at the data, he's like, wait, but the data doesn't line up. There's something, he says, like, there's something wrong with the data, or it's not lining up. And then Loki's confused, like, that doesn't make any sense. We increased the throughput 3 times or whatever, like, it should be perfect, and it's not. And then that's when, like, the light bulb clicks in Victor Timely's head, and he's like, it's infinite. And they're like, oh no, like, oh yeah, like, it is infinite. We're screwed. Like, so that would be the only thing I can think of, is that the data reading from the throughput multiplier is different than what the reading is from the loom. And that's why they didn't know it was infinite until that moment. That's what I'm going with, at least. If I had to give them a reason.
I'll take it. I'll take it. I need something. They're too smart to have messed that up. It's like, I knew this. Why didn't you guys know this?
Yeah. where do we go from there, right? So that happens, and then Loki.
So from that point, that's when Loki realizes, like when he hears Sylvie talk, like, this is always going to happen because I killed He Who Remains.
Yeah,
Uh, and he returns to that scene at the end of time.
that's right. Yeah.
This is a oof. Oh, hang on, before we move on to that, because I had a similar feeling. Remember what I said about like the like I kept having those moments.
Yeah.
Okay, so like Victor walking out on, out to place the throughput multiplier
Yeah.
on the shot thing. Um, I that whole scene, like, I mean, like, I know he has to succeed at some point, or maybe I had seen him fail so many times that, like, I was just like, oh no, what if he fails again? I was so nervous during that scene. Like, I can't even really fully explain why. I was just so nervous. And then, like, finally, like, we're in this scene that we're about to talk about with Sylvie and He Who Remains, and I'm getting the same, like, feeling of doom and
Yeah.
anxiety of, I'm just like,
Yeah.
it's all fruitless, nothing matters, like, we're screwed. Like, there's
Yeah.
nothing we can do.
Yeah.
And I loved that feeling. I loved that they were able to make that, to give me that, like, it
Yeah.
really did feel hopeless throughout this whole episode.
It did, and it's so good. And Jonathan Majors is just phenomenal, right? Like,
God damn, he is.
I'm so glad we got extra He Who Remains scenes. Like, I honestly, I wasn't necessarily expecting that, right? Like, you called it perfectly with him going back to the end of time. And he did go back to the end of time in real time and also in the past. So, like, he went there twice, technically, and millions of times, really. But my goodness. But it was so cool to get more He Who Remains scenes, and these were so well done. Like, obviously, there were a ton of different scenes of him trying to stop Sylvie and him fighting, and Sylvie just succeeding every single time. And then eventually, he says something to Loki, or Loki looks at He Who Remains and is like, what does he say to him? He says, why don't you just stop her? Or whatever. Like, why do you always let her, why do you never fight back, is what he says, actually.
Yeah, that's
He's
it.
like,
Yeah.
why do you never fight back? And this, like, makes He Who Remains perk up, because up until that moment, he didn't know how many times Loki had been there himself, I don't think.
I don't think so. It was the tip off of, he says, why don't you ever fight back? Because
Right.
Loki is tipping him off, saying, like, yeah,
Right.
I know how this goes. And He
Right.
Remains like, okay, this is the man I was waiting for.
Right. I've been waiting for him.
Yeah.
I've been waiting for him for a long time. Right.
Yeah.
And so he freezes Sylvie, right? And Loki's like so surprised that he can even do that. And He Who Remains, quips at him. It's like, oh, you haven't figured out how to stop time yet, or slow it down enough to freeze it. A little quip, and then they just get into this real convo about, like, what is actually happening. And He Who Remains explains to him basically that, like, I told you that I would always have a way to basically be reincarnated. Like, this is always how it's going to go. There's either the sacred timeline or there's a multiversal war. And at some point during this same scene, right, like, Loki's really actually playing him a little bit, because
a lot of it.
And I'm forgetting the order of things now. Can you pick up my slack?
Yeah. So from that point, he's, He Who Remains is putting what appears to be all of his cards on the table, and
Right.
basically saying, like, yeah, I played you. I did
Right.
all this. And then, he unfreezes Sylvie, and he's like, yeah, come back to me, like, when you, like, can be serious. And then
Right.
Loki freezes Sylvie, revealing,
Yeah. Right.
what makes you think this is the first time we've spoken?
Right.
Like, that was such a great turnaround.
Yeah, and then He Who Remains, like, puts a tally in the air for Loki. It's like, you got me.
I loved that, because it felt like such a turnaround from where Loki was at the beginning of the season.
Yeah.
Where he was just terrified of this guy, right?
Right.
And, like, finally, like, after, like, centuries of, like, trying, over and over again and failing and losing because Lokis are always destined to lose.
Right.
He's
He gets
finally
a
able
tally.
to, yeah, he's able to be on equal ground as this guy,
Yeah.
you
And
know?
this is very important too, because it shows that there is some vulnerability to he who remains in his plans,
Mhm.
right? If we're to believe that he actually did get got by Loki in that moment, right?
No, I think he has to because at that point they're beyond the threshold of
Mm.
him knowing
Yeah,
what's
yeah,
about to
yeah.
happen.
You're right. You're right. You're right. Great point.
You know what I thought was
Great
interesting
point.
though? You know what I thought was interesting? And I'm glad you said that because that reminded me of a thought I had. Because when I was watching it, I was like, okay, yeah, this is happening beyond the threshold. He doesn't know what's happening. There is one specific scene though that happens that does not happen before the threshold. It's in the elevator
Yeah.
when our Sylvie tries to stab him, and current Loki stops her. And if you recall, the way that scene is supposed to go is Sylvie is supposed to swing, but he has his tempad pre-programmed, and he ends up behind them. She swings
Yeah.
again, and then he teleports out of the elevator. But that's not what happens in that scene. She
Yeah.
goes to swing, Loki stops him or stops Sylvie, and he remains just like laughs. He's just like, ah, really weird, creepy laugh.
Yeah.
Which was interesting because, like, if he wrote that scene, that means he wrote two different scenes. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Right. Ugh. Fascinating.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Ugh. Where are we? Where are we?
I don't know, man. It's all timey-wimey, mumbo jumbo at this point.
So, but we do need to talk more about their conversation, right, between
Yes,
Loki and He
yes.
Who Remains. So, like, essentially, the main points are that we have two choices, and it's kill. Like, He Who Remains gives Loki a choice. He's like, you have to either kill Sylvie, or it's multiversal war. Basically, telling Loki he's the one who has to sit on the throne and keep the sacred timeline going, or it's multiversal war. Hundreds of variants of myself are coming. Like, and like Loki is like, defeated because it's just a terrible choice, right? Like,
Well, there is one point there that you're forgetting, or you're there. Just needs a little elaboration. Is the loom, if it
yeah,
if it is destroyed, there's a fail safe.
yeah, that's right. Yeah,
If
yeah,
the TVA is
yeah.
destroyed, right, it prunes the rest of the timelines and keeps the sacred timeline intact, right?
So I'm so glad you're bringing this up. So that means that in the previous episode, when we saw those timelines being disintegrated, right? Those were actually just the branch timelines being disintegrated, which means that there was a sacred timeline to go to in that moment. And remember when Sylvie at the end of the last episode, or towards the end of the last episode, she's like, there's nowhere left to go because they all think that all of time is gone. But there was somewhere left to go. They could have gone to the sacred timeline, technically, right? Based based on that. That's what I got from what He Who Remains was saying, was that, like, when the failsafe of the loom means that the sacred timeline will exist. The TVA gets destroyed, but you can rebuild that, which means, like, Loki could have just time slipped to the sacred timeline, and Sylvie could have used a tempad to go to the sacred timeline, but they didn't think they could, or whatever. And it also means that all of those scenes weren't even on the sacred timeline in the last episode. None of them were, because
I don't think any of them were. Yeah, they were all branch timelines.
so super fascinating, right?
Hmm.
But that's what that implies, is that there was technically a place to go, which would have been the sacred timeline. In which case, they would have figured it out on, in that way. But they were, they didn't know, I guess, or they, right,
Well,
or
they didn't
maybe
know
it's
about the
maybe
fail
it's
safe, right?
right. They didn't know about this.
Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't know that the failsafe kept the sacred timeline going. They had no clue, so that's why they
Yeah.
wouldn't know to go to it. It's crazy.
So yeah, it really becomes like an issue at the end of him trying to save his friends, right?
Yeah.
Because they're going to be in the TVA, it's going to be destroyed, um, or they can let they could let them be destroyed and infinite amount of branched timelines, uh, or you could kill Sylvie and stop it all from happening.
Right.
Um, yeah, it's a what do you call that? It's the trolley problem.
Yes.
Yeah, it's the trolley problem.
It's the trolley problem. 100%.
Yeah, and what Loki's solution to this, and I am jumping the gun a bit here, is to just take the train tracks away from the equation and just take them with you. Just take the train tracks with you and walk away. Make your
Yeah.
own path.
Yeah.
That's how you solve the trolley problem.
That was so like fascinating. Like I think we can talk about that now, right? Or I guess we should talk about the how the scene with Mobius and Sylvie real quick. Although not too like not too long, I guess, because they were
Yeah,
just really nice scenes. They were kind of like
yeah. I think we can be quick
emotional
about
and
it. I do want to say one more thing about the He Remains scene.
yeah, yeah,
Um, like you said earlier, I love Jonathan Majors in this role. I mean, you and I were captivated with For All Time Always last year, or
yeah,
a couple years ago when Loki came out, and it was because of this. It was probably the climax of any Marvel thing that had the least amount of action, and it was like the climax I loved the most, and it was all because of Jonathan Majors. And like you said, it was so great to see him back in this role. And it was neat to see him not only do like the whole like Wizard of Oz thing like he did in episode 6 of the first season, but also to kind of just shoot the shit with Loki. Like,
yeah.
like Loki's talking about these problems and he's like, well, it's not a problem. And like, they're going
Right,
over like, they're just like problem solving together. And I
right,
loved that. It's like,
right.
they're just kicking it back. They're like, yeah, we got time to talk about this. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
It was great. I loved that interaction. It was so different than their first
I know.
interaction.
It was so good. It's so well done. I want more of that scene,
Yeah,
really. Like
me too.
where they're just trying to solve the problem, and He Remains is just like, look, I have solved the problem. I've literally done this.
Yeah.
Like you're trying to solve a problem that I have already solved. You just don't like the
Mhm.
solution, but it's the only solution. And the other side of the solution is multiversal war. And I can tell you that's not great. So like pick one, like literally pick one, Loki. And
Mhm.
he did pick one. And
We're going to a
unfortunately,
multiversal war, baby.
yeah, unfortunately for all the people in that, part of the world and universe and timelines, it's not going to be great. But fortunately for us and all the other Marvel fans in the world, it's going to get crazy.
Can't
So
wait.
let's
I'm here
go.
for it.
Um,
So yeah, the let's do the Mobius scene first.
yeah,
Yeah,
this
we
was
go back to episode 1, Glorious Purpose.
episode 1. Yeah, and we're in the room, in the interview room, right, when he's first talking to Mobius, and this is the room that they showed Loki time slipping to quickly in the previous episode.
Yeah, you're
Remember,
right.
he was time slipping
Yeah.
everywhere that the variants of the TVA people were, except that room we didn't know what it was, because
Mhm.
that's the room he was time slipping to. So we got an answer to it. This which
Nice.
we just
Yeah.
didn't we just
Good
didn't
good call.
we just didn't recognize it from last season. Really, is all.
Mhm.
I don't think we were supposed to. We I guess either way, it was either we recognize it or you'll remember during this episode what that room was. But so that's the room, and yeah, that was just like a wholehearted scene. Just like
Well, we do learn some new information in this scene, right?
oh yeah,
We get a background on Mobius, and it's not clear that he's talking about himself at first, but basically him, telling Loki about like the problem with burden and the weight of burden, right? When there's a purpose, a glorious purpose that you're supposed to maintain, that responsibility, right? Great power, great responsibility, right? That's
right,
basically what he's talking about.
right,
And yeah, and he hesitates looking at an 8-year-old boy, which I think that was a great choice given what we know about what Mobius's variant is,
Right.
given that, he has boys, right? Uh, and the calamity that happens because, he hesitated, he faltered, right? He faltered for a moment and it led to the deaths of his comrades. And of course, the the badass who has to finish the job is Renslayer,
Prince there, yeah.
which is a surprise to no one. That she's
Right.
like, 8-year-old boy,
Right.
send another. I'll do it again.
Oh my gosh.
Please. I'm just giving them out for free. I'll prune all the little boys. She has no heart.
I can't. I want to, but I can't clip that for shorts. There's no way. I'm not doing it. I'm not gonna do that. I don't.
Yeah.
No.
If we ever do get monetized, well, that will get us demonetized.
That's demonized. Oh my
Don't
God.
prune us,
All right.
YouTube.
No, yeah, that's great. Don't prune us, YouTube.
That's gonna be my intro. Awesome.
Nice. I will say though, when they mentioned Renslayer, I was like, "Oh shoot, Renslayer was a thing last episode." Like, I totally forgot that she was pruned and like probably at the end of time. So, and when they mentioned her name, I was like, "Oh, okay, we probably get an answer now for what happened to her because they brought her up." But yeah, that scene ends with Loki standing up, shaking Mobius's hand, and then that timeline gets incinerated. And then he goes to Sylvie. Right,
He goes to Sylvie at Ouroboros' workshop on the
Ouroboros'
branch
workshop
timeline.
on a branch timeline. Yep, and that was this scene was a little heartbreaking, right? Because like he explains to her the situation, and she's like, she's such an interesting case to me. Like, she has all the evidence, she knows what he's telling her is true, and she is so adamant on the free will thing. And like she's so adamant to not see the bigger picture, but to her the bigger picture is free will, not multiversal war, right? Like to her, having the choice is the bigger picture, not having stability.
Right.
What it's just like
Right.
such like an incredible like pull and tug of two characters. Right?
I really enjoy that. It's like, yeah, you're trying to save everything, but like, what's it worth if everything is horrible?
Right.
It's a good point to raise. I'm not necessarily saying I agree. I do, for the record, but
Right.
but yeah, it's a really interesting point to bring up, especially at the end of all things, right?
Right.
Good for Sylvie for sticking to her guns. At the end of all things,
Yeah.
you can't say that she's a hypocrite.
Yeah.
Well, I guess she is kind of a hypocrite, but she stuck to her guns, man.
Yeah. And she was like, "You want my permission? I won't I won't give you my permission to kill me or something," or whatever she says.
It's a blessing. You're not gonna get
Blessing.
you're not gonna get my blessing.
You're not gonna get my blessing. Come on now.
Yeah. Oh yeah, go kill me. That's fine.
But really, like this Sylvie making her case right there is, I think, what changed Loki's mind. It made him make the decision. He was like, you know what? I know what I have to do. And what an incredible ending. He goes back to those moments when Victor Timely is supposed to walk down the stairs and walk out the bridge. And instead he walks down himself, locks the door so no one can follow him, uses his magic to open up the doors, and then walks out without any protection. Which, like,
we called that, remember? You and I called that. We said, we were like, maybe there's something about like Asgardian like DNA that makes them like a little resilient to it.
Right. Because like, yeah, because the hilarious part's like, well, he could have done that himself the first time, like if he's...
Well, I thought about that. Well, I was like, well, why didn't he do it the first time? Well, it was because like he didn't really know, first off, that he was going to be A-okay, right? And then like B, like I think in the back of Loki's mind, like he's the only one who can save everything, which is true. And if he's wrong, then like that's the end of everything, right?
Right, and at
because
that moment,
there's no time slipping out of that.
right, and at that moment, it was just like, this is the option, and I know that this is what I have to do, and it's gonna work, basically. And that's a really awesome scene though, because he's walking out and he's like, transforming into Loki. And we get the horns back. We get like a new
Yeah,
outfit
King
that
Loki.
we get King. Is that what it is? King Loki.
He's got his kingly attire. Yeah,
Yeah, I guess it is. Yeah, because he's sitting on a throne, right? Yeah. We'll call him
yeah.
King Loki. That's a good point. We get King Loki. Amazing. New suit or whatever, and new attire, and and yeah. Then he just disintegrates the loom, gets rid of the failsafe, and all of a sudden we just get like webs of multiversal branches, just webs everywhere. And such a weird scene, but like really, really cool. And it's just silent. Everything's quiet. And then he just starts grabbing them and he starts sending his signal through. And I guess he was doing that to try to find the end of time so he could go sit on his throne, while also pulling the branches away from the TVA, right? Putting them back into the rightful place, which is chaos.
Which, by the way, as he was walking out and like he takes on like a more classic look for Loki, and he's using his magic, I immediately thought back to the Journey into Mystery episode, with when he's met all his other variants, and there's the older Loki played by Richard Grant, who like tells him, I think him and like the other Lokis, he's like, when they're all talking about like their gimmicks or whatever, he's like, nonsense, a Loki's true power comes from his sorcery. And then of course, like he goes out like a badass,
Yeah.
fighting Eliath and putting on like that amazing illusion, right? And then
Yeah.
like as Eliath like overcomes him, it's him screaming out, glorious purpose. Uh, that's all I kept hearing as Loki was like slowly kind of transforming into Richard Grant, was just
Yeah.
glorious purpose.
Amazing. Yeah. I mean, nothing else to say, right? Like he's collecting the branches and he dramatically takes his stairwell to his throne, and um yeah, he takes the throne, sitting at the end of time as you called, basically, and now we're just waiting for the multiversal war to begin. And then of course we get an after, right? It's like, okay, well, what's happening now?
Yeah, the epilogue.
And we get this cool visual of, it's no longer a loom, it's the tree.
Yeah,
you
from
know
Thor, from Norse mythology. Yeah,
yeah,
that's absolutely right.
it's the tree, and the trunk is Loki, basically
Yeah.
sitting at the trunk of this tree, and he is essentially sending the branches out into the multiverse, which is really cool. But yeah, we
Which,
get
yeah,
the
for all the times we have talked about branches, it is amazing that this is the first tree that we
yeah,
actually see. That was a really neat idea.
yeah, first tree. Finally, we get the branches line up with what they're coming from now. um and yeah, we get the after scenes, which the episode up until that moment was so chaotic and loud and frightening and like all over the place. And then the second that Loki takes the throne and we get the cue card for what happens after. Um, it's so quiet. Like it's like it's peaceful, it's quiet, but what we really know is that it's the calm before the storm, basically. Like, one storm's gone, figured it out, but now like the big one's coming, basically.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like so eerie how quiet like the rest of the scenes were in the episode. It was so weird. Um, but yeah, I mean, most of it is business as usual. The main difference really is that Mobius has decided to leave the TVA for a while, maybe for good, and he wants to explore what the whole point of it all has been. He wants to know what he's been fighting for all those years. And And yeah, uh, but before that, there's a moment with B15 and Mobius where they're talking about, their mission now is to find all the He Who Remains variants, is the TVA's main mission now.
Yeah.
And there's a moment where Mobius is like, oh, there was something on 616, but it seems like they took care of it. Which I imagine that they're talking about Quantumania.
Yeah, that seems
And
like it.
Kang, I think, is who they were talking about.
Mhm.
But did they say a branch of 616 or did they say 616?
Ooh. I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and check.
We have to watch the episode again. I
Oh,
thought
yeah.
I thought he mentioned a branch 616, and I was like, wait, if they're talking about
What?
Quantumania, does that mean it was just wasn't actually our 616?
So hang on. I'm willing to bet that he just said 616 because I don't think we have branches anymore. I don't think that there is like a sacred timeline anymore with what Loki has
Oh,
done.
yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he said 616. Maybe he said 616A, which would mean then it's probably the normal 616 because it's the first one. I don't know. Maybe I heuld something, but regardless,
Either way, yeah, I think
I
you're right. I think it's
they're
supposed to be
talking
a
about
reference.
Quantumania, and
Yeah.
which is cool. So it was cool. We got that little thing there, and yeah, but then yeah, Mobius wants to go back and see what the timeline is like and what he's been fighting for. And Sylvie has no clue. She's like, I'm just gonna do whatever, like she gets
I
to
mean, she
be.
told us, right? She wants to try everything.
Yeah,
Maybe continue to work at McDonald's. They're
right.
one cash register person short now. She just left. She didn't even put it in 2 weeks. The hell, Sylvie? You stab God and then you just walk out on your job? Like, geez, man.
So crazy.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, totally. Oh man.
um, I think what I find so interesting about the ending is the way the first season ends. There is a question about who has free will, right? And Renslayer at one point even says like, "I'm going to find free will," right?
Mm-hmm.
And she's talking about He Who Remains. Like she's trying to find He Who Remains because like as Sylvie brings up, like the only person who has free will is the person who controls everyone else. And the way that this season ends is like a direct argument to that. It's like, well, it could be that no one has free will except the person who rules it all, or everyone can have free will except the person
Except,
who's holding it all together.
wow.
So
Yeah.
Loki with his glorious purpose, he kind of loses out. He loses out on his own free will, right? I mean, it was his choice, and it was a great choice, but yeah,
Well said.
he's kind of a
Well
prisoner.
said. Well said. That's brilliant. Yep. Yeah,
Loki, man.
that's a great place to end it on, in my opinion. I think. Was there
Think so
anything
too.
else you wanted to talk about? Anything that we forgot? We do have to do
I will.
grades. This is the end of a show, so we get to
Yes,
score it.
yes, that's
But
true.
before that, was there anything else?
Yeah. I thought it was funny that we went to the void and we got to see Renslayer eat it.
Yeah, right.
That was not necessary, but thank you. I enjoyed that.
But
Um,
the little relic from, I guess, the previous multiversal war sitting on the ground there? Did you see that?
yeah, always, all time, always.
All white time always. That had to be been
Yeah,
like a relic from a previous war or battle or something.
yeah,
Maybe.
agreed.
This is very
Oh,
interesting.
yeah, sorry. There is one thing. One thing that I thought we were going to answer and we never really did. So in episode 1, season 2, Ouroboros, um, when Loki, the first scene of that episode is Loki running away from the TVA. But if you recall, at the end of episode 6 of season 1, in the finale, when he ends up in that era, they're talking about all the different branch timelines that are just coming out of the woodwork, right? And we're led to believe that that's the current timeline. We don't know at the time yet that that's the past,
Hmm.
right? later in the second season, we learn that's the past. And I thought, oh, okay, we're going to learn what that is. Like, what was going on there? Like, why was the branch timeline thing happening back then? And he erased everybody's memories. Was that the multiversal war? And was the TVA part of
Mm.
that?
Mm.
I don't know.
Well, yeah, no, you're absolutely right though. That was what it was, because at the beginning of episode 5 of this season, when Renslayer and He Who Remains are talking at the end of time, they showed us that flashback scene of them talking, and He Who Remains saying that she did a great job with, helping during this war, and she was a big part of the victory, and that she needed to go back to the TVA now. He was going to be right behind her, and then that's when he wiped her memory. That must have been what it was. That makes a lot of sense, right? That was the multiversal war.
I think
Flashback.
so.
That makes sense. That's crazy. Very cool.
We'll get more. We'll get more. Or as He Who Remains would say, "See you soon."
See you soon. All
See
right,
you soon.
let's do grades for the series.
Yeah.
What is it?
Oh,
I
man.
always forget. You always have to remind me.
So
Out of 10, out of 5?
Movies we do 5, series we do 10. It's been a while since we've done this.
We have not graded something in a while because of anyway.
Well, the last time was Secret Invasion, and what a stark contrast this is.
Oh wait, did we grade Ahsoka?
Oh, we did grade Ahsoka. Oh yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. Yeah. Oh, that was a good show.
That was a good show. Yeah. Unfortunately, you remembered a bad show.
I did. I did remember a bad show. But you know what? It just left a sour taste in my mouth that I haven't been able to get out.
Yeah.
Ugh.
It's okay.
Secret Invasion. I'll go first. I really loved Loki. I think Loki, it was my number 2 favorite show of all the MCU shows. It is now definitely number 1. At number 2, originally it was WandaVision, but WandaVision, for as great as it is and as creative as it is, for me, it just doesn't kind of stick the ending. I think the climax is a little lost, with it being a Dragon Ball Z fight at the end. Loki is not that. Loki nails the ending, I think. I think there are some hiccups, especially with the second episode of season 6, which definitely still feels like something's missing there. But overall, this is a great show. I'm simping, and maybe I'm just so excited from like what I've just watched, but I'm giving it a 9, dude. Like I loved this.
Yeah. I wanted to go a little higher. This is the best TV show that they've done, and this is
Glorious scoring.
This is the best season of a TV show that they have done. It's better than season 1 of Loki. It's the best season they've done of any TV show in the MCU to date. No arguments. There's like, if anyone wants to argue against me on that, please, you better come with some evidence. I'm gonna go with a 9.2. It's a 9.2 out of 10. It's fantastic. It's sad how it ended, because I think you're correct about there not being a Loki season 3 at the moment. This is setting up this multiversal war situation. We're going to get a ton of new variants of Kang and He Who Remains and all that. We're going to see a bunch of different Lokis, I imagine. So we're still going to get some Hiddleston. We're going to see this version of Loki again. I don't know when, but there's no way that he just sits there the whole time, especially if it's going against him and his friends towards the end, right? Like, we're going to get this multiversal war, and if the He Who Remains variants are winning, I imagine he comes to save the day, maybe. I don't know, but it's a 9.2. It's a fantastic show. And yeah, now we get to go watch the Marvels over the next week and do that at some point.
Indeed. Before we close this, I do want to share, I just remembered it, what was absolutely my favorite line of this whole episode. And there was a lot of great dialogue in this episode, but the line that just got a great chuckle out of me, He Who Remains talking about like his contingency plans to always survive, and like, you know, the fact that Loki has seen him die a bunch of times. And he
Yeah.
just rattles out, "Oh yeah, you know, R.I.P. HWR." It's so stupid, but I loved it. I loved it so much. It even took me a second. I was like, "Oh."
I didn't get it till just now. That's great. That's so good. Oh man, fantastic! What a show. Well done,
Yeah.
Marvel. Good job. Hopefully,
Mhm.
hopefully it gets some of the media off their back.
Seriously, I you know, we can talk more about this later. The Marvels is coming in a bit mixed. I'm very
Yeah.
interested to review that with you.
Yeah, me too.
And I guess that will be the next thing that we talk about on this show.
Yeah, we got to try to do that within the week. It's going to be tough. Next week's super busy.
We
Um,
got it. We got it.
Figure it out. Yeah, we'll figure it out.
Yeah. Any other closing remarks, sir?
Glorious purpose.
Glorious purpose. And as always, may the review be with you.
Peace.